Only by stepping beyond the wall can you ever begin to understand what happens here. For in the Western media, facts that seem clear are in fact quite twisted, and so it takes time to recognize the lies that masquerade as truths. At all times, Israel is in control, even when everything seems out of control. Behind the scenes, Israel is constantly undermining and provoking, pulling Palestine in 1,000 different directions, all the while hiding behind its media persona of the innocent victim.
A suicide bomber also hit at a checkpoint in the West Bank. 3 people were killed.
During the run-up to the elections, rumours of corruption within the PA disillusioned Fatah supporters.
Okay, like me, I am Fatah, but I voted for Hamas.
Palestinians across the West Bank were also infuriated when Hamas candidates polling in East Jerusalem were suddenly banned and arrested.
Within hours of the announcement, trouble on the streets of East Jerusalem.
The inevitable backlash was a landslide victory for Hamas, which produced a predictable response from Israel and its allies.
Israel's acting Prime Minister says he will not negotiate with what he calls an armed terrorist organization.
If your platform is the destruction of Israel, it means you're not a partner in peace.
The settlements continue to grow regardless of international condemnation.
Where we are now in Yanoun is a perfect example of places where there's problems because of settler violence.
Last week they were beating one of the old people because he's speaking Olive. They beat him till he bled and they broke his chest by a stone. Big stone.
I'm ashamed that people like this live in Israel, the people from Itamar, because the people here are peaceful farmers, ancient Arab, that don't want any problem. Just want to work their land.
In Yanoun village, they were beating him by the M16 in his face and they broke his nose.
The settlers every time make big problem and danger for me. I go to this field. And danger for me, I go to my trees, my olives.
The ideological settlers claim that God gave them this land, and so they constantly provoke and harass their Palestinian neighbours.
When we were picking olive last year, they killed 2 persons. Without any excuse, خلص. They killed 2 persons because they were in this land.
I can't imagine how it must be to live like this for years and years with this feeling that one night maybe the settlers come and burn your house or hurt your children.
These settlers are one of the more sinister tools of the occupation and play a major role in Israel's overall plan to remove Palestinians from their land.
I think if you took the army out of the West Bank right now, there's a large possibility that, we'd all be reading in the news tomorrow about, angry mobs attacking all these settlements and everything. I don't care if you hate settlers, but it's a horrible thing to massacre innocent people, So, so the army, I think, has to be there in order to defend these people.
Those settlers don't even deserve those soldiers. And those soldiers ain't so great, but they don't even deserve them. They're so, all their projected strength and hatred and racism and just blinding, just horrible.
I absolutely believe that we have an equal right to Palestinians to live here in this land, but I don't feel we have certainly a greater right. And therefore, it's my obligation as a rabbi to uphold the highest values of our Jewish tradition, which leave me feeling profoundly disturbed, embarrassed, and angry when I see the many ways in which we're using our superior military and economic power to violate Palestinian human rights.
But that's Zionism. That's part of the situation of always trying to keep this sort of cauldron brewing, even when it's so obvious that it's completely racist and just has no future.
definitely a factor in perpetuating the occupation is misinformation and Israelis' deep racism and sense of superiority, towards Palestinians, and belief and fear, immense fear, like that's conditioned from like pre-infancy, like from the second they were born, to like know that these people are all bloodthirsty, violent, all they want to do is kill him only because he's a Jew.
I disagree with the army at this point going into Balata, because I think, just killing terrorists is going to give way to more terrorists.
What I hope is just for the refugee camps' children to have a normal chance. Most of them, they don't have any chance. Most of them.
There's 30,000 to 35,000 people here, and more than half of them are children. And a huge proportion of those children are very damaged.
All what we do since 1948, okay? It's just reaction. It's reaction to occupation. We are occupied. We didn't go to a place, or to a country where people were living there, having their normal life, and trying to kick those people out of their houses. That's what they did with us.
In 1948, the newly proclaimed State of Israel encouraged the influx of European immigrants to build up its military strength. Militia groups were mobilized, and so began the systematic ethnic cleansing of Palestinian lands. Hundreds of Palestinians were massacred. More than 670 Palestinian towns and villages were depopulated, forcing around 750,000 refugees to flee to nearby countries. Palestinians who dared to return were executed. Entire villages were demolished. Crops were burned and water wells were poisoned. A political policy was then established that stripped Palestinians of their rights. The process was completed with the help of archaeologists and biblical experts who renamed the Palestinian geography, erasing Palestinian historical connections for all time. Refugee camps were established in Syria, Jordan, and Lebanon to accommodate the thousands of homeless Palestinians. The West Bank, now under Israeli military control, has 19 official campsites. What began as tented encampments have now become overcrowded ghettos. Balata is the biggest of these camps, housing some 20,000 registered refugees.
A lot of the families are very poor, and they just live on simple starches, bread and rice all the time, and very little protein. There's more than 15,000 school children here, and they don't even have a playground other than at the school. There is not a tree for them to climb. There's nowhere other than the streets for them to play. And a lot of the houses here in the camp have no natural daylight. Off the two main streets, the houses are surrounded on three sides. As they go up, they build further and further out into the streets and closer to their neighbours to get as much space as they can. There's a shortage of water. There's very good pure groundwater in the area, but the nearby settlements pump it out at an unsustainable rate. So there's not enough water here in the summer for people to shower and wash themselves, never mind their homes and their streets. But there's no recycling here, but because of disputes with Israel, they're not allowed to use landfills. Palestinian rubbish is just disposed of either by burning or by being left out on the land. Outside the camp, the rubbish is just dumped and that includes the food waste, the carcasses from the animals they slaughter, and people's bathroom waste, because the drain's not good, so they throw the toilet paper out with the rubbish. You've got to look at the place and see that society here is so depressed and worn down that sometimes they don't even have the spirit left to care that they're living in the middle of their own rubbish.
We were 10 minutes away from going into Balata, and in the end they cancelled our mission. But, I mean, Balata is well known to be probably between the 2 or 3 most dangerous places in the West Bank for Israeli soldiers. And it's known to be kind of, terror network inside there. They call it the Ken Mechablim, the nest of terrorists.
Language plays an important role in justifying this war. The Jewish militia who resisted the German assault on the Warsaw ghettos during World War II are rightfully remembered as freedom fighters. But Palestinians defending their ghettos against the Jewish assault are suddenly branded as terrorists. Westerners are often too quick to judge when they see a Palestinian with a gun. Critics are eager to voice their opinions of these fighters, forgetting that in most cases they are merely mimicking the Hollywood construct. But whichever way you choose to interpret this situation, understand that Israel created it.
Know what is the reason like he became a fighter. They are occupied. Their lands is occupied. People, their friends killed, their families killed, or they destroyed their houses. And it's a lot for like 20 years old person, like he lost his father or his brother and his friend and destroyed his house, and every time like army make a problem for him. So for sure he's gonna be one of the fighters.
I hesitate to call them fighters. I prefer to call them resistance or the armed resistance, because they're not aggressors. They're not going to other people's homes and attacking them. They are shooting back when the fourth largest army comes and attacks them.
The refugee camps are the forgotten communities. Israel has taken everything from these people: their homes, their land, and often their loved ones. With little chance of a hopeful future, these men continue to resist the occupation in the only way that remains open to them, and for this the camp pays a heavy price.
Because when the military's attacking, it's all-consuming. It's the only thing that you can deal with. And once that eases a little, you've got to go back to thinking of work and education and future. How do these people do that? There's no prospects. Unemployment in the camp is so high.
Palestinians living in these camps have struggled with 60 years of dispossession. They have been exiled to a life of poverty and constant harassment. Israel seems determined to make these people suffer, but the more they are made to suffer, the more resistant they become. The right to return is a basic right derived from the sanctity of private ownership. The right to return is an affirmed right under UN Resolution 194 and has been repeatedly confirmed by the international community over 110 times during the past 50 years. Israel refuses to recognize any rights these refugees may have. And to make matters worse, the occupation is destroying the very structure of this society. It's gradually crushing any sense of hope and is teaching children the terrifying lesson that guns have the ultimate power, that guns command respect.
Imagine like 10 years old kids saying for you, I want to be a fighter, I want to be a wanted. Imagine how is how they grown up.
It's so obvious to me how Israel has manipulated things. It's obvious to me that they came in, they attacked all the conventional and traditional power structures here because it was a very old-fashioned patriarchal society. People respected their elders, particularly the men. The checkpoints and the invasions, they humiliate the men, and particularly the older men. So the children grow up seeing their fathers and their respected figures continually humiliated. There's no social structure to cope with that. All the children see is that the 18-year-old soldiers with guns have the power.
I no longer know what to say without sounding biased, except to say don't take my word for it. Please go and see for yourself. Walk amongst these people and come to your own conclusions.
أهم شيء مثلا المعتقلين ما جابوش سيرتهم ما خرجوهوش بنفس الوقت بيقولوا بدنا نفرج بيعتقلوا أكثر من اللي بدهم يفرجوا عنه.
Talk with the so-called terrorists. If you come in peace, you have nothing to fear from these men. Maybe then you will discover, as I did, that they are sincere people who are simply defending their homes and families. Exactly what anyone would do given similar circumstances.
شو بصير عندنا بشوفوا شو بصير عندهم على هذا الأساس بحكموا. لو بيجوا يعيشوا أرض الواقع بشوفوا الحق عند مين هو ومين الظالم.
The occupation is the problem. And what people call terrorism is a symptom of the problem.
We're back to the same point. They want land without people. They don't want us to be here. They don't want us to live here.
There is around 850 administrative detainees in the Israeli prisons. They arrest you without any charge. without any details, without any trial. They take you to the prison, send you for 6 months, and after that they renew that as they want.
And you don't know, this year you saw me, maybe next year you will see me, maybe tomorrow. You don't know. You know, if they know that I'm working with those international to show them that the reality here, I will be in the jail for at least 6 months. At least 6 months. Or maybe they will give me 5 years or 3 years or 2 years.
Some people, they spend 5 years, 6 years, like this, without trial, without charge, without anything. Sometimes they extend your detention 1 hour before you release, before you finish, your time. Your family waiting for you, your children waiting for you. And after that, they receive news that you got, for instance, or you get a new extension.
I don't know. If you will see the mothers here, how they are suffering. And for example, my mother, when I go outside, all the day she will be worried. Because she don't know if I will be back or not.
They don't tell you anything, or they don't explain why you are here.
2 of my brothers who were in jail, and I know how they come into one's house, what would they do. I know the details.
There is no fair trial. There is no legal guarantees for their rights.
I am 26 years old and I am second-year student because I was in jail. I spent 2 years and 8 months in jail, and that's make me sad because I couldn't finish my education early.
Anything related to the Palestinian and the occupied territories, it doesn't work fairly. It works on the Israelis only, on the Jew only. This is the system of Israel. Torture, it's a policy. And Israeli, they don't hide this. And they give themselves the right to torture the prisoners. They beat them when they arrest them, the soldiers. They beat them inside the interrogation centers. They isolate them for 50 days, sometimes 60 days, without allowing lawyers to visit them, their family to see them or to visit them or to hear anything from them. Sometimes they used music. They put loud music. For 24 hours, for instance, in your head. Sometimes they use another method. They put very, very strong light in your cell, very, very small cell. They isolate you for 20, 30 days without speaking any words with you, for instance, like that. Just threaten you to bring your wife, to bring your mom, or to destroy your house, or something like this. Sometimes they arrest children. Under 18 and under 16 sometimes. They beaten them because they know that those children, maybe it's an easy, to deal with them. When you beat them, sometimes they try to deal with them to be collaborators.
Maybe they will arrest me tonight because I'm gonna cause a problem in the future of Israel.
There were many times where I felt that, you know, things that we were doing were a little bit over the top and probably not, you know, the things which are going to stop imminent terrorist attacks, you know, and we're just doing more damage than they probably solve.
They were like occupied house. There is 5 families inside the house, and they were army from 5 o'clock in the morning till now, like it's 7 nearly now, and they left the house now.
In some cases, the houses have been searched multiple times in the past year, you know, and they kept, of course, they kept a record of these things. So I thought it was kind of a little bit ridiculous, but you know, it was with the sole intention of finding weapons. The searches were done in a business-like and professional fashion, and that people were not being hurt, you know, and their property was not being damaged, you know. So I thought, you know, again, it was more than I think a Palestinian family should have to bear to have soldiers come in, you know, at, I don't know, 9 or 10 o'clock at night and search their house, you know, for 10 minutes. You know, obviously, emotionally, that's a lot to bear for, you know, a family. And I wouldn't like it if they came into my house and did that. On the other hand, I feel like that was security motivated. And, you know, and because of that, I didn't have a problem doing it.
It's not just the killing of political leaders, it's not just the fragmenting of the physical territory, but it's also the controlling of every aspect of life.
As you know, I've articulated the vision of a Palestinian state, a democracy living side by side with Israel, and I think it can happen.
The Israeli army regularly invades the towns and cities. Buildings are destroyed, innocent civilians are often killed or injured, homes are occupied, adults are humiliated, children are left traumatized.
Their tactic now is to go into towns and villages looking for people, because there's always somebody they want to get. And these are orchestrated military operations. They're serious, they're prepared to kill people, and they'll shoot anybody.
Palestinians are often used as human shields. Palestinians on the army's wanted list are targeted and assassinated without a trial.
We've come together this week because we share a common goal. 2 democratic states, Israel and Palestine, living side by side in peace and security. To all those in the Middle East who wish to live in freedom and peace, we stand with you.
When the political rhetoric peels away, you're left with a very different reality than the one Israel presents to the world. Palestine is a shattered country, filled with shattered lives. The more I learn, the more it seems obvious that the occupation is nothing less than a slow but deliberate form of ethnic cleansing, obscured by a deceptive media campaign. Behind the theatre of handshakes and promises, more and more of Palestine is stolen each day. Israel talks of peace, but the very word appears to have become no more than a euphemism for oppression.
The only way to have a long-term future, long-term security in this region is to become accepted as part of the region. And the wall and everything that's happening here is pushing us exactly in the opposite direction.
Palestinians don't understand how the West can turn a blind eye to their suffering. They don't understand how the USA can stand for peace and justice, yet it supports the occupation and the systematic destruction of their country.
We are living in the peaceful village here in Zababdi, and this building is a Rabia 1 building. The students of the American Arab School in Zababdi live here. And suddenly we were surrounded by the Israeli army, and then they suddenly started firing their weapons from all surrounded of this building.
I don't think at all there's an army mentality or a normal human mentality to open fire on a non-combatant. I think it's ridiculous. You know what I mean? I can't ever imagine any situation in which anyone I know in the army would ever do that. So I don't really feel, on a personal level, I don't feel emotionally disturbed by the fact that I was once part of a body which has killed children. Because I know that I would never do that. I know that everyone that I know would never do that. And I know that those things that happen are purely accidental.
But those soldiers who were robotic, who were who didn't want to make up their mind and didn't want to think about what they're doing. It takes them a very long time, I mean, years and tens of years to start understanding what they've been doing, and it's devastating for some of them.
The war on terror has become such a familiar concept, but the world fails to notice that here, the real underlying terror comes from Israel.
The problem is Israel has to keep a conflict going to justify its existence. Because if there's no conflict, then there's no need for Jews to form their own little separate group. And there's no need for Jews to leave anywhere or be threatened.
Sometimes it's necessary to stop and think. If Israel really wanted peace, then it would give back some of what it has taken.
And I wish for every country to be occupied from Israel to see what they are doing here. And I wish if they will be occupied, the other countries outside, to show them the reality here, the life here, to know who is those people.
Growing up as an American Jew, one, generally you're very uninformed, and two, you're raised also to be very informed about anything threatening to Jews, primarily Holocausts and anything that, from there on.
Altogether, the Holocaust has not had a purifying influence on the Jewish people, unfortunately.
People in my family and elsewhere, they're so wrapped in fear. They're so wrapped in just emotional identity-based, issues and trauma and perceived trauma and passed on trauma and,
Actually, there have been studies made about how Israeli children react to a visit in Auschwitz and other extermination camps. And the research has shown that about 3/4 come away with the conclusion that after what the Germans have done to us, we must do everything to save the Jewish people, and everything is allowed to us, and there are no moral limitations to what we are doing, because compared to what the Nazis have done to us, all these things are negligible.
Up to 11 million people were murdered in the concentration camps scattered throughout Germany and Poland. 6 million were Jews. What the Nazis did during their reign of terror truly was evil. But the strange thing about evil is that sometimes it sticks to those it touches, drawing them further into the darkness and shaping future generations in unexpected ways.
A child which is beaten does not turn into a good father or mother.
For in Palestine, the once oppressed have become the oppressors, and the bitter memories of the Holocaust are seeding the ground for a new cycle of violence.
You will see them like explode your door before they will enter, without any questions. Like if they attack the building here because of one person, they will kill 20 persons because of one person.
The Israeli soldier, when they come and killed someone, they return to their family and live their life normally. But they don't know what they leave behind them. He makes something in one moment, he shoot and go. After that, the rest of the life of this family is very, very sad, it destroy.
I cannot forgive, I cannot forget. Never ever in my life. My friend Khalil, when I went to his body, it were pieces. There is no face, there is no body inside. I can't forget it.
And it's really bad. I feel horrible that children are being killed. I feel even worse that the mothers are keeping their children inside, because it's a war out there. You know what I mean? I think in a war where you have two sides fighting each other, inevitably people are going to get caught in the crossfire.
The fighters, let's say it's okay, but don't kill kids, don't kill women, don't kill old people. When someone occupied your house, killing you, attacked you, kill everything in your life, what he wants? He wants me to be silent all the time? Never, we cannot accept it.
Come to my mind, what mother is crying now? What father is crying now? What children now have no father?
I came to this country with an open mind, not knowing what to expect. But I left feeling deeply troubled and thinking that there will never be peace until Israel stops lying to the world.
Again, I feel very similar as if I had started, as I did when I started, which is that if it wasn't me standing at a checkpoint, if it wasn't me searching out the people's houses, then it would be someone else, and someone who was likely to do a lot worse of a job than I would. I feel that things that I had to do in the army, I did with, professionalism and understanding, as much as could have been asked for in that situation.
children now ready to bomb himself because his father had been killed. I'm sure every time Israel killed one of the Palestinians, there's at least 5 thinking to take the revenge. This is a big problem. Every time one had been killed, Israel create 5 who is ready to revenge and bomb himself.
And my feeling about the bombers is that this is, a young person who absolutely feels that they have no future here. And basically they have no future anywhere. They're fed up, angry, in incredible trauma about what they have experienced. Often the loss of somebody close, a brother, a sister, a mother, a cousin they were close to, some kind of death in the family. And this is their moment of control.
I can't rationalize these things anymore. And I couldn't then, but I really can't now. I can't say that to my friends there, well, I understand it's tough for you with this wall there, but you're just going to have to deal with it because, your whole people have been criminalized and you can't do anything about it.
I'm not a Holocaust survivor, and perhaps I can never really understand what it feels like to be part of a people so brutalized. But brutality only breeds more brutality, and using the Holocaust as a justification for the ongoing cruelty, relentless aggravation and murderous acts of aggression is unforgivable.
The more disaffected youth you have, the higher the risk of more bombings in Israel. This equation really, I think, is obvious.